we say, give feedback quickly within 24 hours.
24 hours.
Praise in public, criticize in private. And the reason for that is, if you think about your memory, the further away from the moment you get on your feedback, the more vague it becomes. So you start to change it from facts and real story information to, it feels like and seems like you don't want to work here anymore, instead of, you don't show up on time.
Welcome to Confessions of an Implementer. I'm your host, Ryan Hogan. We share unique stories of EOS implementers and the companies they've transformed to give you a rare glimpse into the successes and challenges of the system in action. Let's jump in. First and foremost, thank you for taking the time to come on and just have a quick conversation. I remember when we were talking last month, I remember we got to the end of the phone call or the end of the Zoom, and I was like, "Do you have a doctorate's degree in this?" Because like most people are like mile wide and inch deep, and maybe there's like a few specialties in there, but like the way that you were able to talk about a broad range of topics relating to humans and all those things, like it was really impressive.
Yeah, and I think it's just fascinated obsession around what makes people in teams work, and that crosses everything.
Where did this passion come from? Like, did you just wake up one day and you're just like, you know what, this is my thing? Like, where did this all start for you?
I think it probably started in childhood, like everything else, right? You get fascinated by why am I not included or included in that group, and just observing people and family members. And so I think I was always trying to figure it out, where I fit in and how others were working and what that meant, and kind of social dynamics. And then I think in college, I started like seeing my place in all that. And then I went to work for one of the largest performance improvement companies in the world. And then that probably cracked it open.
What'd you do there?
I helped create incentive programs and products and services that supported them. So things like the bonus structures or gift card systems and those kinds of things.
When you think about like the incentivization and like activating human potential, there's been this like, I want to say recent, and by recent maybe like the last 20 years, but there was always this thing of like, hey, people are here to work and get money, and it's like only been over the last 20 years where it's been like there is so much more than money, that the why people are coming to work. When you were like, what's your, having spent so much time in like compensation plans and incentivizing via money, like what have you seen that evolve, and has that shifted how you think about those things?
So what we knew in this organization in the 90s and even prior to that was that it was never about the money, and that motivating human behavior was always about, we always anchored it in Maslow's hierarchy of needs and getting their base structures right, and getting them to actualization. But it was always about almost kind of that Napoleon quote, they would do anything for a piece of yellow ribbon. And so it was never about the money. It was always about the recognition, the bond to the team, or something what we called non-cash related. I earned a gift card, or I earned a trip. I earned something more tangible than the money, so it didn't become entitlement or part of their salary or comp. So we didn't really do comp structures. We did a do this, get that, which is tapping into human beings. If they do something and you measure it and they achieve it, they do that, they get a reward at the end, right? So it's the cheese at the end of the maze. And just kind of tapping into fundamental human behavior to motivate and incentivize versus comp plans and salaries. And so that's been fundamental for decades. We probably see it more as generationally, the new, Generation X started to bring into we don't just have to work for this like our boomer parents did. So they had a lot more, I guess, loyalty to the job in previous generations prior to that. So prior to the 90s. And then we started seeing that soft skills and paying attention to teaming and humans. And then Patrick Lencioni, right at the turn of the millennia, right? And then Brené Brown, just, a few years after that, we started to see that we were seeing more and more research on that human beings have this innate need to collaborate, build trust, build bonds, bridge with each other. And that's what creates loyalty, retention, results in organizations. So it's always been innate to us, but I think our industrial economy kind of beat that out of us for about 100 years.
I love that. And what's interesting, like when I first became an entrepreneur, or I guess like when I first had a company and we started hiring people, I used to look at everything. So I've been in the Navy for the last 25 years, and I've always looked at the Navy as like bureaucracy, and like the Navy doesn't know what it's doing, and this and that in certain respects. And the more and more that like I've built and I've grown, I've realized like a lot of things that the Navy does is like time tested, and one of those things is awards. And so everybody, when I was just a young seaman, like everybody had to come, the entire unit. So I was at a squadron, there's 500 people. You had to stand at attention. You had to wait for the captain and the XO and the CMC to come down, and they come out. Everybody salutes, everything else, and then there's a row of sailors, and those sailors are all getting awards. And like I didn't understand the value of that until later in life. And it sounds like this is a lot this is a lot of stuff that like you had picked up on very early on.
Well, and also training at this company because that's what they specialized, researched in. And this was the very first incentive company in the world. They were the ones who created the gold watch for retirement. It used to be a family of jewelers, and then in the Depression, what are we going to do with all these gold watches? Let's turn them into an incentive program. It's kind of opportunistic and then backed by research over time. But yeah, it's fundamental human nature to want to be rewarded and recognized, and validated in that space. And so that's why you get the badges and the tokens and the challenge coins and all those things, very simple, low cost things to some extent, really, really matter to not only recognition and trust. When you see someone earn something, it validates their capability to you. You're like, wow, they must be really good at it. When you give an award, you're validating and trust in the trust of the way you communicate to others, and your character shows up. So there's a lot of things that really innately, subtly show up for everybody on the team. And then it's super fulfilling to be seen. So humans want to be seen. We want to be known, liked, and trust, and be seen for the value we bring. When we don't get the time and attention with those we work with, we wonder if we're worth it.
It's so funny that you just brought up challenge coins, because over my left
Oh
shoulder,
yeah.
these mean so much to me. And like I'm not just saying that, like and you had to do something to earn them. Like you don't just get, the captain just doesn't come and just say, oh, you're transferring, and so you deserve one of these. Like there, I could pick one up and tell you exactly like what I did to get that, and they're incredibly meaningful. Um, when you think about the reward structure. Oh, also, by the way, one other comment. The fact that where the whole gold watch thing came, I mean, that's what I was talking about from earlier. That's like mind blowing. And now I'm going to use that as a party trick. When you think about like the incentives, and acknowledgement and awards and things like that, you also talked about, you know, sort of the turn of the century, we really started to realize that like it was inclusion, it was connection, and it was like there were some other things involved other than like do this, get this. Is there like has all this stuff come together, or is there like a strategy in which like I guess my question here is, what are some of the tactics for creating that collaboration and that community and that connection, which it sounds like we figured out that's a really big deal.
Yeah, I think what's happening is, and I think I mentioned this in a chat we had once, that we kind of forgot we were humans at some point at work and in the industrial economy and just like assembly lines, and we were kind of forgetting that it wasn't just about the work. And so our economy was running this engine of just work was work. But then we started to realize that we actually work better when we tap into what made us uniquely special on this planet, which is our humanity. And so tapping into the humanity is really tapping into original science, original nature. And so what I became interested in was, so I mentioned Maslow's hierarchy of need. That one's kind of a psychological principle for a catalyst to getting people to do things, but it didn't account, it was individual. It didn't account
Mm.
for the teaming nature. Humans are community based, we team.
Yep.
And so it didn't account for teaming. So I casually was just collecting information. You can tell I'm an info sponge. That's what you were kind of referencing. Like, I just like this and that's interesting, little factoids here and there. Um, and then someone asked me, will you do a talk on team health? And at a conference, and this was mid 2019, I believe. And I said, sure. So I kind of pulled together all these threads of information I had, some of the research and books I had gathered, and I outlined this talk. And then I shared it with a colleague, and he said, this really needs to be a book. And he shared it with Forbes Books. And then the committee said, we'd like you to author a book. And the next thing I know, I'm writing in the book called The Human Team. But basically, so I stumbled into book writing. But this collective knowledge of that we're trying to get people out of their human nature and activate that real potential that's already there. But we tend to be frustrated by human nature. It shows up as negative or rewired to resist, and we don't know how to get it to move. And so for years, and these incentive programs are one of them, we tried to nurture it. Pizza
Mm.
parties and comp programs that didn't work.
Yep.
Bonuses that don't work. We tried all this nurturing behavior thinking that was going to crack it open. And one of the discoveries and all the threads of research, so this isn't like I came up with an idea on my own, but it's like threading this all together, this complexity, and saying, well, how do I simplify this? And I said, to bridge the gap between nature of humans to nurturing them to better outcomes, to activate that potential, you need to bridge that with 6 facets of human needs. And so when you asked your question, it kind of leads to this answer, that how do you activate that potential is those 6 facets of human needs. And the 6, just roughly, we could spend hours going into them, but it's clarity. Human beings are driven by needing clarity. And the moments they have it, there's like a relief and a path forward. There's no more ambiguity for them to guess at things, to wonder. And when you guess and wonder and have ambiguity, you tend to stagnate and stall. So the moment you have clarity, you start moving. So clarity,
Mm-hmm.
having connection. We bond with others. So I need to know where I fit in. In EOS, we might call it the accountability chart. Where do I fit on the accountability chart? Which team am I on? We need to know how we contribute. So I might have the clarity and I know what team I'm on, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. So how do I contribute in the system? How do I get accountability and productivity into it? One of the needs that people challenge me on, but when I brought a psychologist into the mix to validate this, that humans need challenge. So
Mm.
the 4th one is challenge. I also could have called this coaching. We
Yep.
need people who give us great feedback, who give us the opportunity to be better. If you tried just one more step forward, you could be world class at this. Let me see how we can help you get there. So we need challenge. Without challenge, we have boredom, complacency. We don't move forward. We don't go on past to mastery, all those kind of cliche terms. But we need to be coached and challenged. And without challenge, and we do need it. We might not always want it. I'll put it that way. We do need challenge. We might not always want it. It's always in the way it's given. The 5th one is we need to show consideration. That's where we're talking like all these rewards and recognize. They don't always have to be cash based. A simple thank you, or the 5 languages of appreciation at work, or the 5 love languages, if that's your version you like,
Yep.
are simply ways of showing consideration and seeing the other person and showing regard. And then the 6th one is confidence. Humans need confidence. They need to feel trust. They need to feel good about their own capabilities. They need to be able to step into things with confidence. Without confidence, we won't activate their potential. They'll procrastinate. They'll become wallflowered or shy about it. And the more confident they get, the more clarity they seek, and it kind of spirals from there.
I love the quote in the Human Team for that confidence chapter where it was the Moby Dick, and you're going out on your little paddle boat, and you got tartar sauce with you. That was a good one. I wanted to talk about the connection one real quick, because what we've seen over the last 5 years, I mean, there has been this concept or this notion of remote work for quite some time. But I would say, as a percentage of like the populace that has actually had access to remote work, was very small compared to pandemic and then now post pandemic. What are some ways that companies that are operating in a remote environment can create that true connection to where they're fulfilling one of these six needs?
Yeah, so yeah, this has been fascinating because right as I was writing the book, then the pandemic hit, right? So it's been, then there was all these extra content chapters I was able to write. I wrote extra PDF ebooks, things to kind of compensate for content that wasn't there because it wasn't happening. But remote work still has humans involved. And so there's just some fundamental things. You have to come together periodically in person, even if you are remote. So you have to figure out what that cadence is so that you can get a real human live connection. It's what a friend of mine, Amy Cami, she's a harpist. She talks about biomusicology and entrainment, the idea of brain waves and how we synchronize as humans, that we
Mhm.
get that more in person than we do online. But you can still do it online. It's just you can tell this when human energy walks into a room if they're negative and they haven't said a word, you can feel it kind of go "Ooh," like that. That's
Yep.
entrainment or biomusicology in action. So when we come together, we can feel all of that, not just see it or hear it. So we create whole experiences in our instincts. So coming together periodically, whatever that looks like, it's worth the investment to do. But then in the virtual only or remote environment, cameras on, look eye, right? You need we what I was just listening to something, I think it might have been on NPR. I can't remember. I think yeah, it was on NPR, one of my drives. And they were talking about they were trying to get AI to understand the shapes they see and
Mhm.
understand that humans see things mostly like if you see a big giant wall of shapes, the moment you see eyes, you look in. Like you're like, I see eyes in that corner. Like you can see eyes immediately. Like in almost any clutter, if there's a set of eyeballs, we look right at it. So we
Huh.
really make connection through the eyes. So having cameras on is an absolute must. I also talked about there's a great synergy in teams, especially when they're remote all the time, every time, is to make sure their backgrounds are unified, to feel like they're in the office
Hmm.
together. So having a common
Ooh.
themed background makes them feel like they're in the same space. Geography is important and location's important to the human brain. So right now I feel like we're in two different spaces, right? Because our backgrounds are
Yeah.
different. But when we share a common theme or a common color, something unique that we all share, it feels like we're all together. So we can kind of trick
I,
that being in person a little bit.
that's huge. I've never heard that before, but that I can see it. Like I get the feel of what that's
Oh, I
like.
had a team actually take that into principle. So they were running their quarterly EOS sessions remotely for that first year in 2020. And they had someone go into the office and take pictures of everybody's individual office because it has the same color theme and desk styles. And they knew, and so it looked like I was sitting in my office. And one of the people didn't know this had happened. And I think it was the visionary, and he said, "Are you all here with me today?" He thought they were in the space with him. He's like, "You're all here. Oh my gosh, we're in the same
Yeah.
building together for the first time in like 6 months." And he got super excited. And then I think it was the HR person who took all the pictures said, "We kind of just tricked you. Sorry, we're not there, but it feels like we are, right? It's because we're all sitting in the spaces we used to sit in the same office location virtually." So that was a really cool kind of test of that. He really believed they were all sitting just across the hall from him. And he felt super excited. We're here today together. And they weren't. So your brain can kind of feel that. And so you can find all, but the one thing about virtual and remote work is it's the same as in person, with the exception of it requires at least 20 to 30% more time and attention. Meaning,
Hmm.
I have to pick up the phone and call you. I have to be on Zoom more often with you. I have to text you more often. I have to, if I'm a leader or a manager, it's going to take more of my time to engage you as a remote worker than it will someone in my physical space. So I have to be very intentional and purposeful about it.
Do you think that means that the organizations or businesses that are pulling people back into the office, do you think the inverse is that of that is true, meaning that they've got a 20 to 30, like all things being equal, same team, same competency, obviously everybody's running on EOS, everything being the same, Do you think the in-office team has a 20 to 30% advantage?
Yes, I think they do, and they have more advantage, and there's lots of research on this, more advantage for promotion. They built
Hmm.
connections with the people who give the promotions. They more connections with their team, more they get more out of the effort with the team. So yeah, there's kind of a correlation there. But remote work is also a really good incentive and motivator, right? So I want more flexibility and I want to have a few days I work from home so that I can most people are multitasking, let's be fair. I can do my laundry while I'm working and I can so I can at least get a doctor's appointment and flex my schedule. So flexible work, remote work, those things are still needed. So I'm not a true believer in that you have to go 100% in and 100% out. I just think you
Mhm.
have to be mindful of what it means to be in and out and the how purposeful in your time and attention and the kinds of activities and things that are required to do it well.
So, talking about the cadence, so let's say it's a remote team. There's not an opportunity that they're distributed globally, and so there's no real way to like quote unquote bring people back to the office. I'm sure this is a bit of a nuanced question, but from a frequency standpoint of getting the entire team together, like should leaders be thinking about that of, hey, this is on a quarterly and annual basis. So like annually we're getting together for X amount of time and quarterly we're gonna have these little snippets, or is it like, no, if you really want to be effective, it's like weekly or monthly? How do you think about that and what do you tell
There's
leaders?
a matrix to it really, and but so
Hmm.
amount of cost, space and geography, time to get there, there's a lot of variables to that. But I think the if I have a globally dispersed team, let's say the furthest out highest cost team,
Yeah.
I would probably say at a minimum, let's at least come together once a year for a solid day to do some sort of get to know each other, trust building, as well as whatever meeting we're there for. Like we need to do something more personal and social together and more and be more purposeful about it. So if they at least can only do it once, we just did this at EOS Worldwide. So we have a globally dispersed team of 11 that's on the Franchise Advisory Council. Once a year, all 11 come together, and we did in Orlando last week. And that in person made it easier for us to have this IDS time, this issue solving time that's going to support US worldwide because now we understand each other a little better. So that's probably the highest cost, most globally dispersed, like at least once a year. At least give them that. If you can
Yeah.
do it quarterly, even better. Then there's kind of weekly behaviors that leaders need to do. I remember as an early leader, I had to block 15 minutes a week, so it doesn't take much time. I think this is kind of most managers are like, I don't have time to do all that stuff, and they have all these excuses. I was like, 15 minutes a week. Take a clarity break. Pause and think about the last week and all of your direct reports or direct supports, people who support you. Doesn't have to be just direct reports. And think about what they did in the last week that would be worthy of a high five, a thank you note, a small gift. Maybe they won the challenge coin because they did this, do
Yeah.
that, right? What is it in the last week you think is worthy to spend the next week of time recognizing? It doesn't have to be all players on the team, just which ones bubble up. And then the next week, take 15 minutes, think about it, and then put it into action. I did that in my first management role after I was burning out my team. And my mentor said, you can't just go from project to project to project without recognizing them. And he said, you need to figure out a way to do this. And I just instinctually went, oh, I'm going to take 15 minutes and just reflect and wonder, think about what they did so that I can remember to go say thank you to this person. And I did little small things that just I appreciated them in front of a meeting. If they did like that idea you had last week was really great and it did this for this, and just being very mindful and purposeful in very small ways. I would say that 15-minute reflection, and then it was probably no more than an hour over the course of a week spent doing the activities to reinforce, reward, and recognize.
Hmm.
Very low hanging fruit, and people started to feel more engaged. They were retained, they performed better, the burnout went down. There were reports in there, we do 360s so that they felt seen by their manager, they got the time and attention they needed, and it was like moments and little bits in time.
All right, quick break, friends. Do you find it impossible to hire and retain top sales talent? Or worse, are you paying insane recruiter fees who are all using outdated hiring processes? Yeah, I was too. At Hunt to Killer, we were spending hundreds of thousands on recruiter agency fees. And after I sold that company in 2025, I started Talent Harbor. And the whole vision here was to make sales recruiting accessible to small and medium-sized businesses, because the organizations that can hire and retain world-class people are the ones that ultimately win. Most organizations rely on things like ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn, and they get hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes. But we find that the best salespeople are already perfectly placed somewhere else. And that's why our approach is to go after them. And we do that through a business model called recruiting as a service. We do not charge commissions. We do not have success fees. We don't have contracts. We don't have long-term engagements. And we become an extension of your team as expert sales recruiters. If you're tired of the same old recruiters and want to actually grow your sales team, check us out at talentharbor.com. That's Talent Harbor, TALENTHARBOR.com. Let's get your next sales superstar hired.
You said this earlier of this new generation, like they job hop, and that's just become like a new part of the culture. And like one of the biggest expenses on a P&L that's not actually there is your voluntary and involuntary churn. And so the cost it takes, the human energy, the time, all of the things that it takes to go and replace people. And so when you talk about these strategies and retention, for some reason, and this is just my opinion, because it's not on the P&L and you can't see it, you don't think about it constantly. And so we just accept this weird status quo of yeah, people come, people go, and don't think about, wow, that's not good. That's an expense.
Well, you said it. We've come to accept that that's the norm. Humans don't normally, if you think about millennia of human beings as animals, we don't normally job hop our tribe, our family units that we used to we wouldn't have just swapped around for the sake of it. So naturally we don't want to. So I think using EOS terms, if we IDS it, we identify the root issue. Why are they job hopping? And if you get to the root of it, they don't feel connected to it. They don't feel they know how to contribute. They don't feel challenged there. They want something bigger, better to do. Those 6 C's, those 6 facets, a lot of times they don't get those fulfilled. They go somewhere else to find it. And so if we can give that to them, we give them higher odds of solving that root issue of what gets their needs met so that we can nurture the better outcomes. And if they move on, it's because then it wasn't a right fit, or because they did go past our ability to scale with them and they're going somewhere else that can fulfill that challenge for them. But I think we've come to accept that that's just the way it is. All of us want to move around every 2 to 3 years. But when you talk to people who are in that cycle, they stress out about it. I'm stressed out about my job right now, and I'm stressed out about the job I'm going to get in the interview cycle, and I'm stressed out if they're going to like me there and if I can fit in. I'm stressed out if I can maintain that. And then I stress out if I can get promoted there. They're stressed out. And then they're depressed. And there's a lot of anxiety in the workplace. I don't think accepting it is the right path, although it's happening a lot. So now it feels like it's normal.
I never thought about that. Human nature hasn't changed all that much. We don't like change.
We don't.
And so I never, I thought, when I thought about these issues, I was like, oh, it's just what happens. It's not what happened. So then why do you think, did the generation before us, did they just accept or tolerate? Because that didn't happen before, but I can't imagine that every factory worker at the Ford plant absolutely loved their job and felt like they were connected to stuff and loved getting yelled at. Was that this is what we do and we stay here and we tolerate
there
this?
Was some cultural loyalty in our culture for a while. So there was kind of a cultural norm, but I don't think we had as many choices. We have way more choices and options now than we ever did. And especially now that technology surpassed our humanity, when that line got crossed, when all economic people were watching that line get crossed, the choices just exponentially opened up. Choices to do nothing, choices to do job hop. I just think there's so many options and ability. I think way back you had you didn't have much transportation or technology or ways to get to different things. So the factory job in the factory town was the only thing sitting in front of you. And so you had to be loyal if you wanted to. So remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs, survival.
Yeah.
Fundamental safety security is the foundation. If I can find the money somewhere else and it's easy to get to, I'll job hop, right? But I don't think it was easy 50, 100 years ago to do that. Not as easy as
That
it is
makes a ton.
today. And now remote work makes it super easy. I can go anywhere in the world and get a job if I qualify for it and they need me, right? But I
Yeah.
have options. We also get fed a lot of dopamine and chemicals feed in. Our TV shows tell us that all of our homes should look like HGTV homes. All of our
Yeah.
jobs should look like this. All like so we start seeking that. Well, that's how it's supposed to be. And how come I don't have it? Now I have lack. And so I think you noticed the depression and the anxiety going up because we are not seeing the reality of it. We're seeing the promoted reality. Social media is
Hmm.
a huge stressor because it's not real.
Yep.
We all promote a version of ourselves. It's the one time I go to a concert and I take a picture with my best friend, it looks like I go to concerts all the time.
Yeah.
I've only done that
Yeah.
once in the entire 40-year relationship with my best friend, and I just did it on Sunday. So but people are like, wow, she goes out a lot. She lives a great life. I want to live that life too. So
Yeah.
I just
Yep.
think it's a lot of complexity and options and technology, and I think that's causing that frequency, but it's stressful. We are wired to resist as human beings. We're wired to resist change. We're wired mostly for fixed mindset, not growth mindset. And
Hmm.
so knowing that human nature shows up, and we keep thinking we can do other things, comp and I don't know what. Like
Yep.
we're nurturing, but we're not really bridging the gap on humanity and the needs on them. And I think a lot of the things we do in EOS, ironically, as I was writing the human team, I was like, well, EOS helps with that. And so when we talk vision, traction, healthy in EOS, healthy.
Yep.
What's healthy to harness all the human energy in the room to row in the same direction? That's fundamentally all EOS is.
The biggest ahas as I was going through the book is I was like, there's so much correlation here between EOS and the human team and the things that you were writing about. It when you think about the growth mindset and you think about some of these, like this kind of gets back to that challenge that you were talking about and the coaching and keeping people engaged. Like, is that something that the leader should be doing or the manager should be doing, stepping into that coaching role? Or is the pitch, you got to go find someone external, bring them through and figure it out?
No, I think this is what EOS would call be a great boss, be a great coach. And I
Hmm.
think we need to coach our people. I think a lot of leaders and managers, and having observed, I'm 1,050 sessions of leadership teams.
It's awesome. Congrats on that, by the way.
Having yeah, but it's seeing them afraid to approach people and challenge them. I had one yesterday. Was so thankful because the last time we were together, I said, "What if you just taught?" They had someone who wasn't coming into the office, a family member, wasn't coming in the office
Mhm.
due to a tragedy. Was locked up at home
Yeah.
because they just couldn't come to work, and they were needing. This has been like 2 years that this person wasn't regularly coming to work, occasionally, remotely, etc. And they reached a point where like, well, this job really needs to get done, and we can't wait for this anymore. But we're afraid to have the conversation. I said, what if we just asked what she needed and we just talked to her and we just coached her for a moment and said, look, we have this position that needs to be done. We would love for you to be that person. What's that going to look like? How can we coach you in and back into this? And then they reported to me. They had the conversation. It went well. She said, yeah, I'll come in for 2 to 3 days a week. And then they said she came in for 2 to 3 days. She's been coming in 5 days a week for the first time in 2 years because they simply just talked to her. They challenged her to think about
Mhm.
ways of how can we make this work. She stepped into it. And then she was like, I like this. I want to do this. So and will she be able to sustain it? We don't know. Right. But the fact that they were worried about having that conversation, that are we being too hard on her? Should we love and still hold her because she's a family member we care about? Should we allow this to continue to go on? And I was like, I don't think
Yeah.
that's fair to her or you. I just don't think that's what she wants or you want. Let's talk about that. And so coaching is really that challenging, and that's hard for most. It's hard for people to have feedback conversations. I have a friend of mine, Kim Baker, who has a program called WTF, What the Feedback.
I love that.
And she talks about how to give and receive feedback because feedback's the number one trust builder and trust breaker in
Hmm.
most organizations and with relationships. So most people are afraid to give feedback, and most people hate receiving it. Like they get defensive and they have excuses and they feel bad. And so feedback, if you can master that, that's coaching. Coaching is a feedback loop. It's a challenge loop. And so I hope everyone hears it. Just talking to people is enough.
You said feedback is the biggest trust builder, and it can also be the loss of trust. Do you see more of that loss of trust based upon not having the feedback, or is it you lose trust because you gave the wrong feedback?
I think it's well, one, you didn't give it, and then you took some action and they didn't expect it. That might be it. And then sometimes the way we give feedback can break trust because I can do it angrily,
Mhm.
and then you shut down and you don't trust me to give like kind feedback, open feedback. Or sometimes the feedback is given, but like within your, let's say, core values as an example. I'm trying to come up with a generic, not a specific, like I might out someone, but we have an anchored principle in our core values. And then I give you feedback that seems counter to those core values and principles, you're not going to trust me.
Yeah.
You're like, but I thought that that core value meant this. And you're telling me now that you're trying to penalize me or give me feedback on something that's counter to what we all agreed to. I feel betrayed.
Hmm.
Therefore, now trust is broken, and feedback can break that. So how it's delivered, and I remember hearing Eve Masita, I believe was her name. She was a Vistage speaker, or it still is. And she said one questions I remembered from everything she said, because she talks about growth mindset, but I said it was, have you asked your people how they like to receive feedback?
Hmm.
And most people are like, no. And if you ask someone, how do you like to receive feedback? Most people don't know how would they like to receive feedback. Do you like it directly? Just say it. Do you need me to prep you that it's coming?
Yeah.
Do you need me to say softening language before I do it? So, Ryan, all due love and respect, but can I tell you something tough? And you go, okay, I'm ready to hear it. So, how do you like to receive feedback? Or is it based on topic the way you like to receive it? I know a lot of fact finder personalities like to receive feedback by knowing what's going to happen. So, could we meet on Friday so we can talk about scorecard measurables?
Hmm.
Now they can prepare looking at their scorecard and all their measurables. And when you come give the feedback on, I noticed this measurable has been off track for 12 months. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
Like, now, can we talk about that? They're ready to have, because have you ever had someone give you feedback and then you walk out and you go, I wish I had said this. They shocked me. They surprised me.
Yes.
So that's the prep for feedback that some people need. So ask them, what do you need to know? How do you need to receive feedback? And then be purposeful in giving it that way. Because if you give it directly to someone who needs to be prepared for it or needs kind words before they hear it, they shut down. They don't hear you.
This has been I'm in that camp, by the way, like cannot stand giving feedback. And it's very, very, very hard for me. And the pattern that I have fallen into, and I think, I think for the last 5 years, I've gotten a little bit better with it. But I would say like previous to 3 to 5 years ago, all the way back to like when I was actually running companies that, where we were hiring, it was the worst because I wouldn't give feedback and things would keep getting worse and worse and worse. And it would get worse to the point of I only had one option. And so it was like no feedback. And then the toughest conversation that you can have with any teammate. For someone like me, or maybe there's like 80% of people that are like me, like I understand the question of like, how would you like this feedback? How can someone like me get out of our own head to be able to give it?
I use Gina Wickman's decide commandments for that a lot, but it's the one of them is accept it, change it, or remove it, basically.
Hmm.
And and then another one of those is there's accept short-term pain and suffering over long-term pain and suffering.
Yeah.
So when you look at those 10 commandments, there's some kind of threads to giving feedback in there and making decision. But I first will think about, okay, Ryan, I know I have to give feedback, or I have to have a conversation with you. And so am I going to accept this behavior? And maybe I am. Maybe this isn't an important thing to give feedback on.
Hmm.
Am I going to remove the issue or you? Is that the kind of, or do we need to change something, which is the most typical, like we need to coach through this. And so determining how important is this feedback and what kind of feedback. Then what your example was, I waited until it got too big. Well, you chose long-term pain and suffering over short-term pain and suffering.
Yes.
fundamentally. I'd rather you give feedback now, even though it's painful, than wait for it to get more painful. It's going to be pain whether you do it now or later. Might as well do it now. And so I have to always remind myself of that simple principle, because giving feedback's hard because I don't know what reaction on the other side I'm going to get.
Mm-hmm.
But that's where question to statement ratio happens. So I know we need to give feedback. Ryan, can we have time where we can talk? And you say yes. And then I say something and you have a reaction. My job is to listen, reflect, and simply just say, I hear you and I see you. How can we solve this issue together?
Yeah.
And just walk through that together. And many times they come up with the answer and you don't have to, you just did a lot of listening. And you have to say, this is just, and I think in my book, I say, this is another human moment. They're reacting right now, and I have to accept that's normal. That's just what humans do, not take it so, whoa, what happened? And now we have to fight or have this weird counter reaction to it. It's just, wow, something got him there.
Yeah.
And we don't know. I mean, some of that could have been wired from when you were 2. I have no idea.
Yeah.
So just going, hey, what was that reaction about? I saw that made you upset. If I said something that made you upset, that was not my intention. Just acknowledge what you saw.
Yeah.
There's so many and that's a lifelong learning how to have conversation feedback. And I still mess it up. I still forget to give feedback. I still and I'm obsessive about kind of watching for it and understanding it. Or having conversations or fulfilling needs or activating potential, seeing humans as humans. And I still, in my facilitation, occasionally I didn't get enough sleep and I go sideways. My own humanity plays in.
Yeah.
I can't say all of my 1,000 so sessions went really great with me in the room. Some of them I was tired. Some of them I was frustrated. Some of them they were trying to fight against the system. And I was like, why am I here? This is why you brought me. And so my reactions were coming in. Do you not see me as valuable? Like I was allowing myself to come in and not, instead of taking a break, stepping back and go, there's something else going on here.
You talked about listening, like after the feedback. Well, I guess this is a two-parter. Like, number one, how quickly should feedback be given once something is like acknowledged, or acknowledged not as in like you've acknowledged that with them, because that would probably be the feedback, but like you've acknowledged that there's an issue. Yeah, let's start with that one.
There's probably 1,000 different people who talked about how quickly. I know in EOS, in our fundamental how to be a great boss, we say give feedback quickly within 24 hours.
24 hours.
Praise in public, criticize in private, right? So, and the reason for that is, if you think about your memory, the further away from the moment you get on your feedback, the more vague it becomes. So you start to change it from facts and real story information to, it feels like and seems like you don't want to work here anymore, instead of, you don't show up on time. Yeah. Every day you today you didn't show up and it was 9:05 and we were supposed to be here at 8:30. Those facts evaporate. And I often will test this when I teach LMA to teams. I'm like, every now and again I pick someone who has like Taco Tuesday every day and fish fries Fridays. But if I asked you, Ryan, what did you have for lunch 2 weeks ago on Wednesday? Most people
no idea.
It feels like I probably had a sandwich. Like, I don't know. But so feedback quickly gets that really good clarity, so that you can really land the feedback without any ambiguity, and it's crisp.
Yep.
The more vague it gets, the more loopholes and defensiveness and excuses. And are you sure you remember that right? Because that's not how I remember it. And just everyone's off kilter.
Is this something you believe that should be flagged immediately? Like let's just use the late example, and maybe it's like the third time. So the first couple of times, like, hey, make sure you show up on time. Make sure you show up on time. With the 24-hour rule, like let's say someone showed up late again, should it be immediately flagged that like, hey, this is your third time being late. We're going to sit down and talk about this, or is it generally like, no, like wait till you get in the moment. You've got 24 hours to get into the moment, and then go from there.
I think again, you have to weigh, is this feedback worth giving right now? Lest you want to be badgering them on every little thing they do because you think feedback quickly is the most important part.
Yeah.
I think feedback quickly is a rule, but it's not the only rule. If I told you constant feedback is badgering.
Okay.
Right. So I don't want to also be that micromanager badger person. So you can kind of collect some of that A lot of that gets resolved with right person, right seat. But I think you've got to watch the badgering. Feedback isn't always necessary. What are you trying to give feedback on?
And when you think about feedback and you think about coaching, which ultimately goes into the challenge, like is that how you think about confidence or confidence building? It's like creating those loops up here, having them course correct, giving them those challenges, like ultimately builds that confidence which they need.
Yes, I think feedback, as you mentioned, requires a tremendous amount of emotional intelligence, bravery,
Mm,
courage to step into. I mean, it's talking with others is hard,
yep.
and really doing it well is hard. And so I think it's Dan Sullivan who says, if I'm committed to this, I'm going to have the courage to do it. And through that courage, we all create new capability. And when we're capable of doing it, we have more confidence.
Mm,
He calls it his 4 C's. And once you have more confidence, you commit to more things and you get more courage and you gain more capability and it becomes self-feeding. But that first few iterations, it's really hard because I'd love to do that. And then we don't follow through. We don't have courage.
yeah.
So I think feedback and all these relational things on teams and activating human potential and doing things together in organizations does require a tremendous amount of courage. And thank God, Brené Brown made it popular to be brave.
I love that. Um, on the consideration, so when you think back to the things that you used to do, whether it be compensation or whether it be the reward structure, do you think are all of those things and even acknowledgement, so like, in the military awards, does that all fall into the consideration bucket? Is that how you think about that?
Yeah. Yeah. Whatever's going to say, I see you as a human and how can I recognize that?
Okay. So one thing that I've been struggling with lately is, and we operate in a remote environment, and so I 100% agree with like the 20 to 30% extra effort. And so we are very intentional. We get together, the entire company together, for 30 minutes every single Friday. We call it Friday Fireside, and we talk about where we're at, what we're doing, how we're thinking. We'll go over the accountability chart. We'll express some EOS. We'll pull up the VTO. um, the first thing that we start off with is shout outs. And what we do is we tie our shout outs to the core values of the organization. So when you give a shout out, what we're trying to do is we've got things in writing, we've got the definition, we've got a vignette, but we want people to actually look at an action or a decision or something that happened inside of the organization, and we say that is an example of this.
Yes.
And one thing that I've noticed is, um, a lot of names keep coming up simultaneous, and it's not, there's nothing wrong with the rest of the team. It's just like there's a couple people inside the organization that are constantly grinding, and we're like, we have to acknowledge that. Do you Is there like too much, is there too much acknowledgement at times where it wears off whatever you're actually trying, or it numbs it? Or do you think like, no, like always bring them up and always talk?
I think, well, yeah, bring them up. I love that you're doing specifics because I think core value shout outs sometimes good job on core value A, but we don't know what that looked like. So there's no clarity to it.
Hmm.
But I think also you got to watch out shout outs. Sometimes we only look at the big things to shout out, not the little things. So sometimes the people who are getting are doing big activities that are really public and obvious. And so we're shouting them out more because we're not looking at little things are important.
Yep.
So that could be part of that. And then what follow up on the question again, because there was another part and it popped in my head. Now I'm lost it.
Does the novelty wear off? And not that we're not doing this as a novelty. So like maybe that was a poor choice of words, but does the intended outcome or the intended effect of calling people out, does that ever wear off the more that you keep bringing the same people up?
Yeah, I guess you can have too much of a good thing sometimes.
Yeah.
I eat too much sugar, I'll gain weight. But
Yeah.
I think if it's always done, so what you've done is you've ritualized it, which is important for humans to have that ritual. And if you took it away or you minimized it, we'd be like, well, aren't we going to do that anymore? That's part of the way we do things here. That's very important to us to have the rituals. We look forward to those.
Mhm.
We can count on them. So don't take that away, but you can oversaturate and overdo it to where it's a little too kumbaya, too much. It's almost toxic positivity.
Mhm.
And I think you know when you cross the line if it starts not being effective or it feels ingenuine, if it feels forced.
What you just said there, I've been bit by this so many times, and now every time we have a great idea for like a new thing with the company, like we take a step back and we say there's no going back from this. Like we once we give this, we are not going to be able to remove it without like some sort of detrimental impact. But I've made that mistake so many times. So and you just brought it up. Yeah. Yeah, that stuff can come to bite you. And that's we're not thinking about it as far as like the Friday fireside. But there's other things inside the organizations where we're like, oh, that was a mistake, but we can't take it back now.
Yeah, but I think you could walk it back through IDS. You could say, I think that this has good intention, but maybe isn't serving us at this level and scale.
Mhm.
Is it worthy of keeping, killing, modifying? What does that look like? Are you guys super committed to this? Like would fight, die on the hill for it? Like it's part of who we are and our ritual and what we do here? Or was this something we tried and we saw 30% of it worked and 70% didn't? Can we take the 30% that worked and evolve it? I think we always evolve and adapt and change. That's the beauty of humans. We're very resilient. So I don't think you're stuck.
Yeah.
I think you just have to give the feedback and the conversation and the IDS to get unstuck. And that we would call that hitting the ceiling in EOS. You hit the ceiling on that idea, hit the ceiling.
Hmm.
How do we break through that ceiling? And you're like, well, maybe we need to simplify it. Maybe we need to systemize it differently. So maybe it's structured wrong.
One of the things that I had in my very first company, I've like coined it just for myself. It's meaningless anywhere outside of my head, but I call it the timing chip effect.
Hmm.
So I used to have a company called Run for Your Lives, and Run for Your Lives was the first ever zombie infested 5K obstacle course race, and it was great. And what we did was we looked at the industry and we looked at what they were doing, and then we basically copied it, added zombies, and added flag football belts. But that meant every person had a timing chip, and that was a variable cost associated with every single participant that came through. So if it was 15,000 people that were coming through in a weekend, that would be a $60,000 expense just so everybody can have their time. And somebody, maybe a year and a half into the company, was like, hey, this is a lot of money we're spending. Like, what if we didn't time? We're like, you think anybody will notice? And we took the timing chips and we got zero complaints. Zero complaints. And so I have this in my head of the timing chip effect of like where we think that we're adding value and there's real hard costs associated with the value that we believe we're bringing, and nobody cares about it.
Yeah.
And when I think about that in like the management of humans, how do you, like, one of the things that we can't measure is like the net effect of our fireside. One of the other things we do is like we'll send out coffee gift cards or dinners, and we look for different things or opportunities where people are really stepping up. But it's hard to measure that and like the actual impact of that. How do you suggest, like, when we were just talking about taking things back? How do you suggest like philosophy or measuring or like trying to decide what to do and what to not when there's not much that you can actually correlate it to?
It is hard to determine causation correlation in some of these things because so much of it is threaded and matrixed and interwoven that it's hard to tell which thread is the one you can remove and which one you can't sometimes.
Yeah.
I mean, really, it's like, was it the time or was it just the fact they love zombies?
That was it.
It was just the thrill of the event. It didn't matter. But probably if you took the timing thing away in a marathon, that matters. Like a real,
Big
like,
time.
right?
Yes.
And so it's what's the level of impact to the mission or the purpose, the core focus of the event. The timing of it wasn't the most important part.
Yeah.
So you were able to pull that thread out and it didn't matter as much. It's a whole Jenga thing, all this stuff, right? So which pieces can we keep and which ones do we pull to keep intact and whole? It's such an art science thing. And it's like, there's no one right answer. And I think that's part of the beauty of these, these strategies and these visions and these purpose statements and our core focus, and then the traction and the action and the accountability and all the issues we solve to get to these points. It's why Gina said we got to get all these human energy balls to row in the same direction. Otherwise it's chaos and complexity. To kind of unthread things and test it is fun, and then see if you have to thread it back in. But yeah, there's no right answer to that, unfortunately. But creation is complex, and hitting goals is complex. But there's always kind of, and it's what my friend Dixie Gillespie will say, there's an original intelligence to things, sometimes, right?
Yeah.
You know that this is causing culture to create an organization that's great. And I think we see it in postmortems, or when we look at companies that are failing and we're like, oh, remember when they were great? Southwest might be an example, right? When
Yes.
they had some very clear fundamentals that made them a different kind of airline. They were profitable, they had great revenue, they had great culture, they had a raving fan base. They were successful on all counts. They figured out 737s are one plane. It minimized maintenance costs, pilot training, gate, whatever happens, right? So all the tactical things and logistics were easier. They simplified everything. They created a culture both externally and internally. And then they sold off investors, private equity, and et cetera. And over time, now when you fly them, you're like, they didn't even tell a joke of any sort last time over the intercom. Like, there was nothing said that was fun, which was a fundamental principle when Herb Keller created it. And so you could have never guessed. Is fun important? Like, it's hard to tell. But when they took it away, yeah, apparently it was.
Yes.
It was super important. Was being a different kind of airline important? Yeah. And when they became like everyone else, and they tried to leverage the company and break it into its pieces, and now assign seats and bag fees and all the things that make them like every other airline, I'm like, why would they want to be like every other airline? Because the spreadsheet said so.
Yep.
The spreadsheet said we could pull all these levers to earn money, but every other airline fails, and Southwest was succeeding, and we just broke what succeeded. So it's hard to tell which of those threads would have broken it. But now in postmortem, we see it. Like, we can see in the Good to Great book, right? So Jim Collins, most of those companies aren't great anymore.
Yep.
They could have maintained greatness, but those fundamental reasons why they were great, the 12 reasons why companies are built to last, are fundamental across everything. And if they lose that, they're no longer great.
I'll pile on to this. Southwest used to have this whole thing of like, celebrate that the flight wasn't full, and they would celebrate that, and that celebration would start at the gate, and then once you got in, and it was celebrated because you'll get a full row, or you can sit anywhere you want. Now they're still saying the same thing with the caveat of, but you still need to sit in your seat. And so now what we're seeing is like these social media pictures of like, I don't know, 12 people on a plane all stuck in the back of the plane with the entire front of the plane. It is crazy to me what they're doing right now. Crazy.
Yeah. It's going to become like every other airline. They're not going to be profitable. They're going to need to have, I think at one time there was many bailouts of the airlines, right? But they were the only ones not bailed out. I remember in one of them.
Yeah.
And now they're just like everybody else. The bag fees, and they were like, you're 2 pounds over on your bag and you're going to owe us money, would have never been said in the past.
Nope.
And we had to buy an extra bag leaving or coming to Orlando because we just had a couple more pounds. We had 5 more pounds. And we had to buy like a $30 bag or pay another $50, or I forget what it was. And it's like, wow.
Jeanet, if you want to start an airline,
not friendly anymore.
No. And I've been thinking about this quite a bit, because like now there's just a vacuum. Like there's such an opportunity to like fill that void. I can't stop thinking about starting an airline.
But that happens in every industry, in every way. We lose sight of ourselves. And that's why, like, our vision traction organizer, that's what guides all your decisions. That's, your core values, your core focus, all those tenets. Why living with simplicity and obsessing on that. I remember watching a presentation. I'm going to blank on his name. I think it was Jeff Hoffman. He used to own Priceline. He said he just obsessed on, he asked everyone, so what are you working on right now? And when they would answer him, he'd say, how's that helping us book more hotels?
Yeah.
And if they couldn't answer that, he said, you have my permission to work on something else. If it's going to help us book hotels, we're all unified in that mission. Let's go. And they were great at what they did, and overstocked hotels and getting them offloaded to people, and just the obsession as a team unified them, and they were highly successful. I don't know how it's doing today, but it's probably not as successful without that obsession and simplicity. And that's what core focus can do. But yeah, that you got to focus humans in a direction, or they won't grow. They won't move with you. And then it starts to fray at the edge and fall apart. And it happens in every organization if we lose sight of ourselves, if we lose sight of the fundamental.
100%. There's this, I've been thinking about this over the last like month or two. There's just a cyclic nature to business, and like a great entrepreneur can compete in almost any industry because you come in, you do things different, you suck up all the great talent, you set a great culture, and then you go sell the company to the, we saw this in my buddy just launched Waste Management. So like Waste Management, that was like the private equity case study in like roll-ups, but now they're just like everybody else. And so like now you can go into any market, compete with them, build a great thing, and then you just sell to them. But it's maddening that a great culture can win in almost any business is kind of like my new hypothesis.
Well, I had last fall, I think it was early October, I posted on LinkedIn an article in collaboration with a few others. I was starting to feel like an angst in my heart around all these companies that sell not just to private equity, but other investors, buyers, right? Yep. But they have leveraging strategies that break apart companies to just look at the statistics in the spreadsheets. And they think that pulling these same levers over and over are going to do anything. Well, it does help initially their 2 to 3 or 5 year window, and then they're in and out, right? So it's a very short-term thinking thing. And I get why they're doing it, but it doesn't help the business whatsoever. In the long term, there's actually more money there than was in that short-term break apart lever pulling. And so my heart was breaking for all these companies that were like falling apart. I see so many of them that are very popular names. I don't want to out them because I have so many connectors at them. I don't want them to think I pointed a finger at them, but they just fall apart. And so I was like, there's got to be some way of getting them to see the magic of 3 things, and it's purpose, people, and profit. And so if you stay aligned with your purpose at the top, and you know how that's going to impact people, whether they're clients, the community, your ecosystem, your employees, and you know how that's going to align to your profit, you maintain a stable 3 legs of the stool in that business, it will be worth more to you short-term and long-term than anything else. If you could lean just on the profitability, the lever pulling, the finance, the spreadsheets, you make all your decisions just from that, and you lose sight of purpose, it's not worth as much. If you only do purpose without financial, of course, right? Yeah. So all the legs of the stool are very important. And I think the purpose, people, profit, 3 legs of the stool is where I hope investment firms of the future go to really truly get all bottom line win-wins, as well as future growth and long-term stability and growth of organizations versus just short-term capitalistic breaking up and everyone's after it just for the dollar. There's so much more money in it in the long term than the short term.
I love that. Capitalism's great. It drives innovation, but it's not perfect. And I think we see many aspects of that. And the other thing you just talked about there is like, these are real people. These are like people that were bought into the culture that like poured their heart into this thing. And then you just see time and time again of where, it's just all about the money and the spreadsheets and everything else. And then it's just a slow degradation. Okay. Jeanet, this was amazing. 2 last questions for you. Number 1, real quick. What do you look for in clients? So are you geography based? Do you look for certain industries? Do you look for certain mindset? What do you look for in clients?
I'm mostly geography based would be the first answer. So Missouri. Yep. Nice. I'm in St. Louis, but I have clients in Kansas City, so kind of across the state. And then I'm looking for those that are dealing with those complexities, would like to get to simplicity, who have 25 or more people. I know EOS is kind of that we want 10 to 250. We can deal in any size organization really, but I like it when there's more humans involved because obviously that brings my skill of facilitation into play a little more. So if they're in St. Louis and they've got people problems, I'm here.
Love it. Last question. How can they get a hold of you?
They can get a hold of me by going to my EOS Worldwide directory page. They can email me, jeanet.wade@eosworldwide.com, or text me, give me a call, 314-488-0791.
Love it. Jeanet, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm glad that we got to go deep into all 6 things. So thank you for taking the time to come on.
Absolutely. Thank you.